All right. Good morning. Good morning. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone. Welcome in. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. You can watch the show on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. And the SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. You can also hit favorites.com, and get a quote in 4 minutes or less. All of our guests join us on the Modelo guest line, and we welcome in Jim Nagy with Executive Director of the Senior Bowl down in Mobile, Alabama. And the NFL Draft is a week and a half away. Jim, good morning. How are you?
I'm great, Bo. Good morning.
Well, man, thanks for joining us. I want to, before I get into quarterbacks, I would like to first discuss Elijah Moore. He had a tremendous year for Ole Miss, and it was all conference games, as you know. And he played in 9 of them, and he was dominant. And Kiffin and Levy did a great job with him. And, of course, Matt Corral had a big year. But there is talk that he could maybe find his way into the first round. But most people believe that he'll be off the board early, mid, second. How do you see – what do you think about his game as he goes to the next level in the NFL, Jim?
Yeah, Elijah's a really, really talented player. He's one of the most dynamic guys in the draft. The only knock is going to be size, obviously. That's really it. So, like you said, I think Lane and Jeff did a great job of scheming him. I think one of the only question marks is what's going to happen at the next level when he's in a little more tight quarters. You know, like they did such a good job of just letting him operate in space. And it's going to take a creative coordinator to figure out ways to get on the ball as well. That's just a way bigger man's league up there. So, you know, I think you could do a lot with him out of the backfield. He's just so explosive. You got to find ways to get the ball in his hands, and which Ole Miss did a great job of. And really, what resonates the most with Elijah, talking to the guys on the staff up there, is like he's one of their favorite guys. Some of those coaches I talked to, one of their favorite guys they've ever had, which you don't hear that a lot. At the wide receiver position in terms of leadership. I'm like, that tends not to be a position where you really draw leadership from. But the staff at Ole Miss loves Elijah, speaks a lot about his leadership, his character, his maturity. So that's going to separate him as well. But I do think, maybe in that late one area, but it's such a deep wide receiver class that I think teams are going to wait a little bit there. So that might push some of those guys into the second.
Jim Nagy, Executive Director of the Senior Bowl, joining us on the Modelo guest line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show. All right, I want to bounce this off of you. Cole Kubelik said, he didn't really see much of a gap, if any, between Elijah Moore and Smith and Waddle. That maybe if he was wearing crimson and white, there would be more buzz and love. Your thoughts?
I see more of a gap than Cole, it sounds like. But that's no knock on Elijah. Those other two guys, in my mind, are two of the best receivers that have come out in a long time. Jalen Waddle's the best returner I've scouted since Devin Hester, and he's obviously the best one to ever do it. So I think that's what separates Waddle from the rest of this class, even Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith. That if you have a head coach that's willing to use him in the return game, now he's a complete difference maker in 2 phases of the game, and he might be the first one to go off the board. But again, that's no knock on Elijah. I'm a huge Kadarius Toney fan from Florida as well. He's a guy that has a lot of similarities to Elijah, but he's bigger. He's 5'11" and change. So it's just a great class. I mean, all these guys, you hate to say anything about any of them because it sounds like you're being nitpicking or you're knocking them when you talk about who your favorite is. It's just a really good class. You throw in Rondale Moore from Purdue, and then you go into the bigger guys like Nico Collins from Michigan and Bateman from Minnesota and, Amari Rogers. Like he's another slot guy that Elijah is going to be going up against, and he's only 5'9.5", but he's 213 pounds. He's 30 pounds heavier than he's 30 pounds heavier than some of these other smaller slots. So it's just a great year for receivers, and there's a lot of different skill sets and body types, and it's just what fits best and really what these teams need. You got to plug one in and at the next level. If you have 2 or 3 good ones, you plug a guy in that has a complementary skill set. So that's how they're going to come off the board, is how they fit with all these teams.
Jim Nagy with the Senior Bowl on the Modelo guest line. So do you have Waddle over Chase?
I don't really do a board per se because of my job here at the Senior Bowl, and ESPN tries to get me to do some of those, ranking stats.
I got you.
I'm in a little bit of a different place because I have relationships at these schools that I need to lean on. I go into these schools every year. I think we had 7 Alabama guys in the game this year, and we had 8 Ohio State guys in the game. So I tend to stay away from where I have guys ranked. But both they're right. I mean, you're splitting hairs either way.
Okay, well, how about this? What's the talking positively about the two, what is the difference in the two between Chase and Waddle? How about that?
Chase plays the big man's game. He plays bully ball at the college level. The interesting thing with Chase, and you don't hear it brought up a lot, and again, the only thing that teams are, friends in the league are talking about is, will that game carry over to the next level? He's 6 foot and change, like 6 foot and a quarter, 200 pounds. Most of the guys that play Jamar's game at the next level are 6'3", 6'4", 220, 230. So he's a tremendous player. He's explosive. I was at the Pro Day in Baton Rouge a couple weeks ago. He absolutely put on a show. So that's his game. He plays a power game. He's very, very strong and physical. And then Waddle's completely different. He's electric. You get the ball in his hands, and it's not just quickness, it's speed. I think we don't know what Jalen was going to run because he hasn't run a 40 yet, but we've all seen that 40. Some of us have seen that 40-yard dash run that he had against Ruggs last year when they were both at Alabama together. And we know I've timed Ruggs in the 4.2s. So if Waddle's somewhere in the 4.2s, you're talking about rare speed, rare playmaking ability. He can do both punts and kicks, which a lot of guys can't do. And then what he does at receiver. Had he stayed healthy a full year this year, he might be the unquestioned number 1 guy. So okay. I think it just depends on who you're talking to in the league. I walked around that LSU Pro Day and asked a lot of friends around the league like what that order is for them on their board, and it totally varied. Some people had Smitty 1, some had Jamar and some had Waddle, and I think the teams that had Waddle really see his impact in the return game being the difference maker.
Interesting. All right. Jim Nagy on the Out of Bounds show in the Modelo guest line, executive director of the Senior Bowl. He joins us on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're a week and a half out from the NFL draft, which is exciting. And so far right now we've hit Elijah Moore, Jamar Chase, Waddle and Smith from Alabama a little bit. But this class, he mentioned several others. It's talented and deep. And, okay, how would you describe this wide receiver group that is about to get drafted, Jim, and the talent and the depth of this position going into the draft next week?
Well, it's coming on the heels of a great one last year. You look at last year's rookie class with Jefferson in Minnesota and Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco and Chase Claypool in Pittsburgh and Michael Pittman Jr. in Indianapolis. You go down the list. Last year's group was an excellent group, and now we've got a second year where it's back to back like this. So that raises the question why? Like why are these guys transitioning so much quicker than they did? Say even just 5 years ago. I think a lot of it has to do with all the 7-on-7 stuff they're doing these days. But that used to be really a position that took a couple years, sometimes 2-3 years, for receivers to really get up to speed, and that's no longer the case. So the difference between last year and this year, last year's group had a lot of outside guys. This year is more of a slot heavy draft. You see a lot of these guys are going to project mostly a slot. So, Terrace Marshall is one of the only bigger guys. Nico Collins, who I mentioned, that fit more primarily as outside guys. But 2 great classes. I know we had a huge number in the first 3 rounds last year, somewhere in the upper teens. I think we're going to be right there this year.
Jim Nagy on the Out of Bounds show. Okay, let's go to Kyle Pitts, tight end or whatever you want to call him, out of Florida. I need him to fall to number 10 to Dallas Cowboys so that Dak and
ain't gonna happen.
Ain't darn it. Happen. Well, there goes that. Thanks for coming in, Jim. No, so that's not going to happen. I needed Dak and Kyle to go to the Super Bowl. So as far as your evaluation of him, I mean, is he one of the most talented tight ends / whatever that you have ever evaluated?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the best one since Vernon Davis. Had Twitter been a thing back when Vernon came out of Maryland, he would have probably broken the app. I mean, what he did. And Kyle's the best one. Looking at recent top 10 guys, Eric Ebron, a little similar athletes, but Kyle's got much more natural hands, much better blocker. I mean, I think we kind of lump. Everyone's been referring to Kyle Pitts as a pass catcher in this year's draft because they want to make that comparison to the Chase, Waddle, and Smith. And I get that, but it really does Kyle a disservice because he is a legit tight end. He's not. I did Jimmy Graham when he was coming out of Miami. I mean, Jimmy didn't want to block anybody, and he really never did in the pros as well. I mean, this kid will put his hand in the ground and engage people. He'll get into people, and he'll work to finish blocks. So he is a legit tight end. You can attach him to the line of scrimmage. You're not going to tip your hand when he's on the field. He's not just a big wideout, is some people kind of refer to him as. So no, he's an excellent player, and what isn't being talked enough about is the jump he made from sophomore tape to junior tape. We looked at him last summer, when we're at the Senior Bowl, just out of curiosity, when we were doing the other Florida guys, and we were doing, Trayvon Grimes and Kadarius Toney, who were here in the Senior Bowl. You couldn't, and Kyle Trask, the quarterback, you couldn't help but notice Pitt. And he was a good player on 2019 tape, but took his game to a completely different level this year, which you love to see, which tells you there's still some upside out there. So that's really exciting. He's a phenomenal talent. You could argue he's the best player in the draft, right up there with Trevor Lawrence.
How about that? Jim Nagy on the Out of Bounds show, executive director of the Senior Bowl. He joins us on the Modelo guest line, and the NFL draft is a week from this Thursday, which is exciting. Elijah Moore should go on Thursday or Friday. And then Royce Newman, we'll see. It could be a big weekend for him.
Yeah, I think Royce is probably going to go somewhere either late day 2, but probably more so early day 3. I don't think Royce gets out of the 4th round. Extremely versatile. Could play all 5 spots. I think he's better suited inside. I would have loved to have seen him snap the ball down here. But we had enough centers, but he's not a guy you hear a lot about in the media. But coming out of Mobile, there was a lot of guys in the league that reached out to ask about what he was like down here because they're so interested in him. You can't have enough versatility on the offensive line, and there's such attrition over the course of an NFL season. You need guys that can move all around, and Royce can do that. Really good athlete, better athlete than he tested at Pro Day. You put on the tape, he's a good athlete. So. I don't think he's going to last. If he gets into day 3, I don't think he's going to last long.
So Royce Newman out of Ole Miss could hang around 10 years or something and make a lot of money, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't. And his best football still ahead of him. He's just one of those versatile guys, high character guy, tough guy, just kind of that small town farm guy. We spent a lot of time with his family down here in Mobile. They were great people. Just meeting them, you kind of know what Royce is, where he came from and what he's, how he's built. And, he seems like a 10-year pro to me.
All right. Let's go to quarterbacks. Here we go. How much does Jim Nagy buy into a minimum, for the most part? Because if you profile the last 20 years, this does stack up. 24 starts minimum, if not more. The blue blood quarterbacks don't really pan out for the most part, other than Carson Palmer and Matthew Stafford. Elevating your team when you're a top 5 recruiter, you don't have to do as much of that, Jim, as you top 10 recruiter. You don't have to do as much of that as Eli, Dak, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, so on, who didn't play at blue bloods. So where does Jim Nagy, fit or fall when you hear the starts, elevating your team, and that for the most part, if you take the 6 to 8 blue bloods, you don't get a lot of NFL QBs out of those programs, Jim?
Don't know where you exactly want me to go on this one, but I'll say that all of the top 5 guys that are being talked about, you can make a case for all of them. Trevor Lawrence, what he did coming in, winning national titles as a true freshman, having a little bit of a sophomore slump on 19 tape. It was really pressing too much, trying to do too much himself, really settled back in this year and had an awesome year. So he makes a ton of sense at one. Zach Wilson at BYU, it looks like, if you just look at the stats, it looks like he came out of nowhere this year until you dig a little deeper and find out he was playing 2019 with a broken hand and a bunch of other injuries that he gutted through. I mean, the staff of BYU tried to shut him down last year. They didn't want him to play just because they knew he wasn't, going to be at his best, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't shut himself down, and he just played through that stuff. So that's why it looked like a great statistical leap this year, but he's always had that talent. And then the interesting thing I find about this year's draft to me is Mac Jones. There's so much blowback right now against Mac Jones being, a top 5 pick. And if he goes 3 at San Francisco, if you just compare the resumes and the skill sets and the talents of he and Joe Burrow, Joe was the, overwhelming number 1 overall pick, widely accepted. Nobody fought back against that. They were both 3rd or 4th rounders, going into their senior years for most teams that I've talked to, and that's exactly where we had them graded at the Senior Bowl. You had phenomenal senior years, record-setting years in the SEC, national championships, undefeated, very similar athletes, very similar from the pocket, accurate, great feel, great leadership. Everything lines up with these two players. And Joe Burrow, maybe it was the Joe Cool factor, and he had that. There's no doubt he had that. But everyone just like, oh yeah, Joe Burrow number 1. That you didn't think twice about it. And then with Mac Jones, there's this growing blowback that like Mac doesn't belong up there. So I just find that kind of fascinating that we're only 1 year removed from Joe Burrow, and really the two resumes line up. They're almost identical. They're skill sets. I mean, you look at the two guys. They're so close. So if San Francisco goes Mac Jones at 3, I think it's a warranted pick. It's a great thing. It's made for a lot of debate, and
Sure.
doing the ESPN stuff that I'm doing now, there's a lot of talking points on this quarterback class.
Now, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, by the way. So, I don't want you to get mad at us or anything. Jim Nagy, executive director of the Senior Bowl. So let's go to this. We just had a listener text us. True Maroon says, the Senior Bowl is the best if you've never been. I've been every year for the past 5 years, and it's pretty cool seeing the players from all over the country. He goes on to say, I've met Jim several times, and he's an awesome guy. Very nice. So there you go, Jim. How about that?
Well, that's nice. That's a great way to start my day. I appreciate that. It is a great event. You guys being up in Jackson, we actually, when Hurricane Sally hit down here last fall, we took the family up and stayed in Jackson for a few days. So it's not, I only say that because it's not that far of a drive, and it's an amazing event. I've only been here 3 years, but I've been coming to the game for over 20 years as an NFL scout, and it's we're trying to build more around the event. We had a Players Mardi Gras parade a couple of years ago. We had a downtown concert, trying to make it more of a party atmosphere. But the football itself, I mean, you can walk around Mobile. The whole NFL descends on our little town here. We're smaller than Jackson, and you can walk into restaurants, bars downtown, and there'll be like 3 NFL head coaches sitting in the bar drinking beer together. Like you don't get it anywhere else. And then you go to practice and you're standing 10 feet from these guys, and you can interact with them. I mean, the access to the players is incredible. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the game a little bit because it's an easy drive, and it really, if you're a football fan, I know I sound biased sitting in the chair I'm sitting in, but it really is an incredible week.
Yeah, and Mobile's only 3 hours from here. So Phil Savage and his team did a great job. You and your team have done a great job. It looks to me like y'all are growing. Like you said, not just the game, but the week and the event. Will you walk our listeners through, we've only got a couple of minutes here, but how intense like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is for the play? Take out COVID. On a normal year, when they come in and they're working out and they're meeting with NFL personnel, can you walk us through that, Jim?
Yeah, it's a stressful week for these guys, by design, because the NFL is a stressful league, just managing it. But they get in town on Sunday. They meet with their NFL staffs. This year it was the Dolphins and the Panthers, and they get their playbooks. And so obviously trying to absorb a playbook in a couple of days isn't easy. They're interviewing with all 32 teams, so that's another level of stress. And then the practices, we just go in helmets and shoulder pads on Tuesdays to, kind of knock the rust off a little bit. some of these guys hadn't played in a while, especially this year. We had guys in the game that hadn't played in like 16 months. They hadn't had pads on. So you knock the rust off a little Tuesday. And then Wednesday and Thursday is just incredibly competitive practice periods. And then Friday we take them off the field. We have a big community service day where we go to children's hospitals and schools and whatnot in the area. And then Saturday's game day. And we moved our game this year from a 75-year-old stadium here in Mobile to a brand new $75 million stadium on the campus of South Alabama. And it was an absolute game changer for our event. So state-of-the-art new venue, great place to see a game, great hospitality, entertaining. And the football's been great. You know, we've had a top 10 quarterback 5 years in a row. Hopefully Mac will now make it 6. And we've had 40 players drafted in the first 3 rounds each of the last 2 years and 93 players overall the last 2 years. It's weird how those numbers have worked out. So that's why we say the draft starts in Mobile. You know, 38% of the draft has been here the last 2 years. So it's just a unique opportunity to come down and get this close to these players and the NFL guys.
He is the executive director of the Senior Bowl out of Mobile. He is Jim Nagy on the Modelo guest line. Got about a minute here, a minute and a half. You mentioned, you've worked for the Patriots and the Packers and the Seahawks and so on. 18 years as a scout, so you've been doing this deal for a while. Even though you weren't the executive director at the time, are you surprised Dak's had the success that he had? I mean, he was the Senior Bowl MVP.
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't go into Mississippi State the year Dak came out, so I didn't do a full report on him or anything. I sat through meetings and we watched him in meetings and whatnot. So I'm a little familiar with what Dak did and what he looked like. But anytime you're taking a quarterback there in the 4th round, I mean, you're drafting him to be a backup. You know, when I was in Seattle that year, Dallas tried to trade up to our first pick spot and take Paxton Lynch, and our GM traded that pick to Denver, and they took him. So I really think Dak was the fallback option, and Dallas was the opposing coaching staff in the Senior Bowl that year. So we do let the other team kind of work. You know, we kind of have a team swap for a day. And they fell in love with Dak. So to see what he's become and like the highest paid quarterback in the league and a superstar, it's awesome. It's awesome. But it goes back to who Dak is. I remember Coach Carroll. I wasn't in on the scheduled interview they had with Dak that year in Seattle, but I remember seeing Coach Carroll afterwards, and he's like, Jim, do you know much about this Dak Prescott? I said, I really don't. He's like, that's one of the most phenomenal kids I've ever met.
Wow.
So that part doesn't surprise me. After Pete said that, it doesn't surprise me.
Jim, thank you so much for your time this morning, and congratulations on your success with the Reese's Senior Bowl. We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, Bo, thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Executive Director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, 18 years as an NFL scout. He joined us on the Modelo guest line. That was great. From Elijah Moore to some other receivers, quarterbacks, Kyle Pitts, and they're doing a great job down in Mobile for the Reese's Senior Bowl. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The SEC Insider Hit this morning was brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Steve Robertson in 5 minutes, recapping the weekend. Hail State, Ole Miss.